Let's go ahead and start. Then we'll go ahead and call the meeting to order at 4:03 p.m. And roll call. Annette?
Do you want to switch?
No, just
Okay.
loud enough.
Sure. Mrs. Cole?
There's Gail.
Here.
Mrs. Flanders?
Here.
Mrs. Lyons?
Here.
Mrs. Miller?
Here.
And Mr. Ruiz?
Here.
Quorum.
Thank you. Adoption of the agenda. Recommend the Board of Education adopt the January 28, 2021 study session meeting awards. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Nicole?
Second.
Carrie, second? No discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Aye.
Motion passes. Motion passes 5-0. And Brad, will you do, since you have that beautiful flag behind you, will you handle that?
Everybody could please stand with me and recite our Pledge of Allegiance. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance
Pledge allegiance
to the flag
of
of the
the
United
United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with justice for all.
Thank you.
Okay, Annette, do we have any public comments tonight?
We do not.
No public comments? All right. Then we will move straight on to section 3, which is the study session. Brad?
All right, thank you very much. And Rick, I believe you're going to be sharing your screen as we give him just a minute to pull that up. And I'd just like to thank the board for your additional time this evening before our regularly scheduled board meeting. Always hard to find additional dates and times and so forth, but this topic is so important that I appreciate you working your schedules to be able to join cabinet as we just talk through this tonight. Facility master plan is a broad term that takes into lots of different things into consideration. But what we're really going to be focusing on tonight, Rick, next slide, are just a quick look back as to the kind of the steps that were taken. Excuse me, facility master plan was conducted back in 2011 and it had information that was timely at that time, but in 2018, it was pretty well outdated. And so the board recommended that we go out and do another facility master plan, and things that were comprised of that was talking to stakeholders, went to schools, had community meetings, just looked at our historical enrollment data projected into the future, capacity at schools at that particular time, walked with a group, and we'll look at that document briefly tonight, walked the facility and took a deep dive at just kind of all the mechanical parts and pieces and quality of our roofs and floors and just so many things, HVAC units. And that was a comprehensive study. And we will be referencing that tonight, but next slide, Rick, if you
and for those that have never seen the master facility plan, it's not a document that sits on a bookshelf or in the office. It's actually a link in our main web portal. And it's really an interactive facility plan, as you can kind of see. For those that have never seen it, it goes into exactly what Dr. Mason was saying about discovery and assessments and planning. And you can drill down as far as you like and get in the weeds. There's a summary page. You can go to AeroVista, for example, and kind of see and take a little tour through this particular site. Talks about at the time, the date of original construction, campus area, kind of gives you an idea of what the existing makeup building floor plan is of the existing site. And as we went with stakeholders and such, as they put the green dots and the red dots and all the others, kind of a vision of what it could be if we had a lot more funding, and then really kind of just breaking it down. So it kind of like it begins the blueprint, as you might say, of our conditions and just some estimated costs of repairing and replacing and modernizing and going forward. So those that have never seen it, I encourage you to go on that website and look through this plan. It's a very nice interactive document. To give you an idea. So let me go back to the main plan there and the next slide.
Yeah, and speaking to dovetail into the words Rick just said, interactive. Board members, this is not a pure presentation. We're going to be doing definitely presenting information and so forth tonight, but this is really the genesis of a study session is really a discussion or a dialogue over a specific topic. And tonight, the slice of the facility master or the slices of the facility master plan that we're going to be talking about is in a smaller scale, just the reality that every year we get 1 year older. And though our bond measure did not pass in March 2020, Measure G, that doesn't mean that we're any better off than we were at the time where we went out to the electorate. We're actually a year older and a year worse. And so we're going to talk a little bit about the realities in the deferred maintenance world of what capital do we have in order to commit to those projects, as well as just kind of an initial list of some of the things that really have our attention that are some larger ticket items right now. But the lion's share of our time tonight or this afternoon is really going to be focused on capacity in our schools, and we're gonna look at projected building in the city of Brea. We have some of our own projections. The city, through the police department, did a study and just anticipating what projected growth over short, medium, and long-term development would look like for the services they provide for the city. But that information is incredibly germane to us as well, because new housing generates new students, and new students occupy seats in our schools, and we need to be ready to welcome those students in. And you're going to see that we are at a pressure point, and we need to bring everybody up to speed on kind of where we're at, what capacity we still have outstanding, and what we're anticipating over the next years as that development comes online. So tonight we're gonna look at deferred maintenance. We're gonna understand our current classroom capacity as we sit here. And the caveat or the little asterisk to that is we still are in the midst of the COVID pandemic. And so we have started a new school this year, a full online academy, which has probably 210-ish of our rounding students enrolled in it currently that otherwise would be in our schools. So even when we get to the slide that shows our current capacity, that's with 210 students that are enrolled with us in our district removed because they're in an alternative program. And as we continue to roll into the 21-22 school year, we look to still continue that program. We're just starting enrollment right now for new students. We're going to be doing our re-enrollments, and so we will determine how big that program needs to be moving forward. But it's our anticipation that some of those families that made that choice may want to cycle back to in-person instruction in the 21-22 school year. So some of our current capacity is going to be eaten up just as students return, and we'll talk more when we get to that slide. We need to understand the impact of enrollment growth in our schools and its impact on both facilities and staffing. So we'll look at slides later that address that. Need to understand as a board and a leadership team here in the district, what funds do we have available? We know that the bond did not pass, so we know the funds that aren't available, and the large scale scope plans that we have for the district, those are put on pause, and those need to be revisited at a later date. But we need to take a look at the facility funds that we currently do have and figure out how we might be able to leverage those for meeting our enrollment capacity needs moving forward, and then begin to discuss an approach with the board addressing those needs moving forward. So this is the first in multiple conversations that will be coming back as we kind of hone these plans. So next slide, please, Rick. Rick, do you want to talk through a little bit of this slide?
Yeah, well, obviously, as we plan for the future, as Brad alluded a little bit earlier, we still have needs today, right? We went through an extensive facility assessment report which really classified immediate needs, repairs, modernizations, code requirements. And as you recall, and bear with me as I click back and forth, but I just want to get everyone available. We went through and site by site did an assessment of every site, right? And this was done again at the same time frame. But if I click on, for example, for Aero Vista, you might recognize this from DLR Group. But again, it starts diving down into the weeds of what was identified through this. And this is really deferred maintenance stuff broken up again with costs. And if you recall on a previous board agenda item, I brought forward a alternative for replacing concrete. It's a shaving process in which we completed, and it works great. But that was one of the ideas, one of the things that came out of this report. So Jeff Ferrato, no stranger to any of us here on the screen. He is our institutional knowledge person, been with the district 15 years, leading a great department of men and women as we now are attacking these items that are listed. This has now become our go-to list besides solving today's immediate needs that arise going forward. That just kind of gives you links of that. So that continues to this day and will continue in the future, which takes dollars and times things. So if we start addressing new items in the future, it will either add to or replace some of the stuff that's been identified, because if we are replacing something, let's just call it 2-3 years from now, we may not need to repair or just make enough repair to get us to a certain point. So very, very frugal with those dollars and process, but again, it just needs a roadmap. And then of course, I always want to circle back to that master facility plan, because that is our document. And as we go forward, we will now be updating this document through the DLR group.
And Rick, if I can jump in and talk a little bit about, we've got a slide a little further down where we'll talk about some more specific deferred maintenance things that have our attention right now that we're going to need to discuss with the board and get some direction on. But other things that are really in our instructional program side are, as we continue to hone and build our career technical education pathways, our facility needs are going to change. For instance, this next year, we are moving a video production that had been transacted at Bray Junior High School. We're expanding that to Brea Linda High School, and through a grant that Carrie Torres and her team wrote for, we were able to secure funds to outfit a classroom that will be used for that, with the technology and just the pieces of the instructional tools necessary to execute that program. They're not alone. As we look at a variety of other CTE facilities, we made some adjustments at Bray Junior High School over the last 2 years, converting a couple of classrooms into kind of more STEM lab spaces. And so we're going to have to continue to consider what program needs moving forward are. And then the other is, we're also going to find, when we do our inventory of classroom facility space, if we were to receive additional kindergartners or transitional kindergartners at our schools, we do not have any new classrooms that are outfitted with restrooms. All of them are occupied right now. And so we need to be purposeful and thoughtful in our approach to, as we build out facilities at our different school sites. A classroom's not a classroom. What you need for a 6th grade class is not what you need for a kindergarten class. And so we're going to have to kind of track this very closely, because as the students arrive, we need to be prepared for them. And elementaries, we're going to find it is a real pressure point for us as far as classroom facility space.
Oh, sorry about my fault.
Yeah, no problem. Classroom facility space. City of Bray will share their slide in a little bit that show the increase in numbers of elementary, junior high, and high school students that are projected over the next 5 to 7 years, or 2 to 7 years. And our discussions with the board are going to have to lead to an approach. And one approach could be just continue to add, portables or wings or whatever on our elementary schools. to just continue to build capacity or space, as trying to move attendance boundaries around makes sense when you have, a preponderance of space in certain areas of the city and not in others. And the reality is we really don't. We're pretty tight everywhere. And so it really is about building capacity at all of our elementary schools. And so one approach could be adding wings or dropping portables and just building out as the children come. Another approach, and one that was considered in our facility master plan, is transitioning our junior high to a middle school at an indeterminate period in the future by adding a 12 to 14 or possibly 16 room math science technology wing. And you see the, Rick, if you kind of highlight the floated building on top of the building, the N1, yeah, right there. That blowout up to the right-hand corner, that's really a 2-story building that the architectural rendering dropped in the middle of campus, and that's 12 rooms. And the plan or the vision could be to build capacity at Brea Junior High School. And as that's being built, 7th and 8th grade continue to occupy Brea Junior High. But when that is built, Rick, go down to the lower left-hand corner there on the corner of Brea Boulevard and Lambert, those 3 brick wings could then be released for the teachers in there, occupy the new facilities on campus, and the 6th graders could be transitioned to Brea Junior High, which would become Brea Junior High or Brea Middle School at that particular time, releasing 2 or 3 6th grade classrooms at each elementary school. And I would not want anyone to think that this is just a sheer capacity or facility driven decision. Carrie Torres and I were both principals once upon a time at middle schools that had 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. And though there'd be lots of dialogue with the community in Brea, the benefit of a 6th grade on a junior high school or middle school campus is a much more robust elective program, whereas they have music enrichment 1 day a week, or they have some exposure to a variety of things. Languages 5 days a week, music 5 days a week, PE 5 days a week, things that are not a reality or possible on an elementary campus could become a part of a 6th grade program. And anyway, that's the instructional piece is a discussion for another time, but that's just another approach we could take. Then we would evaluate as the 6th grade would move to a middle school and releasing 2 or 3 classrooms per elementary school. Would that create enough space at some of our schools for some of our anticipated growth? That's, again, another approach. Rick, can we go back?
Yep.
Thanks. And then again, moving 6th grade to Brea Junior High, and then something else, if we were to grow enrollment, taking a look at the potential of building a basic junior high gymnasium multi-purpose room, and looking at the asphalt basketball courts on Lambert, and potentially associating a few classrooms maybe on the boundaries or borders of that gymnasium. But we have a small auditorium at Brea Junior High School, but creating a gymnasium / multi-purpose room would allow for more flexible programming and just a needed additional space at Brea Junior High. So that's kind of some of the approaches that we'll ultimately have to talk about. Next slide, please, Rick.
All right, and this is just a continuing, I'm trying to just drill down a little bit, repeat of a previous slide, but just one of the conversations we had back in, let's just call it a year ago, as we were walking and talking and canvassing for Measure G was, are you spending dollars on your deferred maintenance? So to answer that question, yes, we're showing it now, which we had back then, is we're using those facility reports. It becomes a project to-do list. And we do continue to work through this process. But the current funding model under the local control funding formula has no facility deferred maintenance line item pot of bucket now. It was there years ago under the old revenue with all the, remember all the different pots of buckets that we had to spend, and now it's just lumped together. But as a school district, we are required to spend 3% of our general fund expenditures on deferred maintenance. So I hope this answers that question, that yes, we are going through this process continuously, and depending on funds and budget and the flow, some of the things on this list might get, crossed out as an example, and some might get pushed out, but we are very cognizant of this list that was developed a couple years ago now. So operationally wide, there is some large projects, some large repairs that are district wide, and these are just a few of them. This is not deferred maintenance. This is stuff that really, it's got to be addressed. And we just kind of wanted to highlight some of that, because as we age in place, next year it's going to be a little bit older, and so on. So at our MOT yard, we have a CNG gas station there that fuels our buses. Well, that is, it's on its last band. Let's just literally, because it's aged and it's wearing down, and it's a slow fill machine, which basically means it takes all night, overnight, to refill these large buses. And so we have to really pay attention to that. Right now, we have a plan B if that was to fail. I believe it's the Fullerton High School District where we go there and we can do a quick fill there, but that is a need. At the high school, there's a generator there when power goes out. And it's hasn't been working for years, and the fire department notes that on our little fire inspections every year. That needs to be replaced. Those generate the emergency lights in the PAC building if something was to happen, but it was meant as a secondary source to keep the kitchen and the food service and not allow spoilage if we had power outages, as you know, are becoming more frequent now with high winds. But that is a source of dollars that we need to look at. And of course, the light board at the PAC building, that's now 30 years old, and eBay now doesn't have a lot of the parts. And this is a quote: eBay doesn't have a lot of the parts anymore that we can procure. Tennis courts and the pool, as you can see.
Rick,
yes.
I'm sorry, can I ask a question?
Yes.
Before we move on? Is there any opportunity to partner with the city with the CNG fill station?
Yeah, we're exploring that. Obviously that was one of our hot list items. I just call it my freshman year. Last year it was cut short with COVID, but yes, I know at one time there was there is grants, and obviously the clean energy, which we'll talk about in a sec in the top right-hand corner. There is more opportunities now to retire diesel and gas-filled automobiles and buses and what they call the high polluters, with more fuel-efficient vehicles, which is electric and propane natural gas. So there is opportunities now as we go forward to not so much partner, but maybe go through Southern California Air Quality Management District, Southern California Edison. So this is something now that is wrapping up now in our thought process, but it's matching grants, it's matching funds basically. So haven't explored with what you just mentioned right now, but it is on the list.
I mean, do we both use the same kind of vehicles?
I can't speak for themselves, but I don't know, to be honest with you.
I know we've had a partnership in the past is why I'm asking.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, obviously it's a huge cost, and we did basically the maintenance for Brad. Do you remember any of that?
Yeah.
Way back when?
Part of the problem with our CNG, and when we go to upgrade, because it's a slow fill, we use up pretty much our ports at night. Yeah. But as we explore what's out there in the industry, there had been a previous conversation, and the thing that really stopped it is that we were using all of our ports and didn't really have a place to park our buses because they needed that space to be filled overnight. So if we were able to upgrade to something new, we could look at potentially a partnership. But the other problem is we have a very cramped yard and not room for necessarily all of our own equipment. So we would have to engage in some creative conversations. But when we're exploring this, that would be when we would have those conversations. Yeah. So I do remember some cursory conversations, Gail, dating back, would have been now probably a few years ago.
Yeah, and a couple alternatives going forward too, as technology advances, and this is no in relation to the Tesla owners in the house, but the electrification of vehicles, electric buses. I know I've sent out some weekly reports of Jeff and I attending some seminars and some hands-on stuff. That is probably the direction with the propane as a alternative secondary fuel source. So maybe having the station and putting those funds into a station might not be the same cost effective of just going to another area that's got the quick fills and paying whatever it is per pound or however they sell natural propane gas. So looking at, keeping an eye in the future of stuff that's coming available. So as you know, I'm a big solar person believer, and we'll talk about that in a sec. But anyway, I hope that answers your question. And then just kind of going down the list, we talk, you can see a picture of one of the corners, but I could tell you that's every corner and almost every deck portion of the pool. It's sliding a little bit through earth movement. We've made over the years upgrades on the filtration and the acid. Jeff's going to kill me when I get this wrong, but the process of delivering acid into the water. We're down to one heater now, the 2 heater systems. We made a nice little Band-Aid fix. So the pool was 80 degrees yesterday. I told Jeff I almost pushed myself in, but now the pool is warm, but it's really on that last leg. And I've got some quotes now, which we'll be talking about in February. And going forward, our HVAC systems, as you can see on the right-hand side there's Steve, our rock star HVAC, the best in the county. He's just keeping those 40, 30-year-old, 45-year-old units rolling. As you know, that's him replacing and upgrading the filter system. Concrete and asphalt, just see my tape measure, and that's uplifting from ground movement, not really so much trees anymore because we have a really dynamite tree program here, but that's just to give you some ideas and just code upgrades. But I just wanted to last winter, I dragged some people through and I did the tennis ball test. If you never see my tennis ball test, here you go. I just wanted to show you, if you roll a tennis ball on a flat surface, it should roll straight. This is at the Brahan, this is at the high school district. There's the cracks, as you can see, and I rolled that tennis ball and it should follow that line, but watch how it goes. See it's now going downhill. So if you're playing an opponent, you want to be uphill and hit downhill, but I don't think that'll really work in a match. But when we show this to people that we walked through last winter, that people said that your new high school doesn't have any problems, and this was our grand finale on the tour. They stopped, saying those things. So just to give you an idea of the process.
And Rick, if I can jump in real quick.
Yep.
When we get to things on this list like concrete and asphalt, that's a health, safety, welfare issue like the one that Rick had mentioned earlier at Aero Vista. We don't get to not address and fix the things like you see the measuring stick or whatever in the asphalt there. That's kids running and playing in trip hazards and so forth. Those are things that we have to find ways. And then to the left, the measuring tape where the concrete's lifted, 1.5 inches or 2 inches and so forth. So we have to do things like that. The thing that we have shared in the past with bond measures and in communicating with the public, things like a pool are a necessity to people that are in water polo and aquatics and swimming for PE, and tennis courts are essential to people that play on the tennis team and for PE facilities and so forth. The numbers associated with, and we don't even have them. I just have heard round numbers of people kind of done guesstimate stuff in the past. Part of our job is going to be to dive in and figure out what the cost is to address some of these issues. And with the limited funds that we have, our tennis courts could become unplayable. And we will have to get very creative to how we maintain a tennis program or other things like that. Because we can't host matches and have our kids playing on things that are literally unsafe for them to run around. So this is not a list that we're telling the board that we're going forward and these are the next things we're being done. These are all heavy cost considerations that we need to address. And we're going to talk through the pros and cons and seek direction from the board ultimately. And some of these things, just knowing the limitations of our funds, some of these are going to be very tough decisions that are just going to be at a future date when we have more funds, we can address these things.
Right.
But not now.
All right, can I add one more thing? It just appears to me, and again, we all know that the money is going to run out way before we can do all the things that we need to do or want to do.
Sure.
And so, I mean, have we even stepped into the realm again of we've got to find partners? I mean, I just look at what, is ahead of us, and whether that's the city, are there ways we could, I don't know, do something with the pool together? Tustin's got courts that are used by iTennis that they've obviously partnered with to get resurfaced and revamped and add pickleball courts and the rest. I mean, it just seems like going forward, these are such high ticket items, and we just, in this district without a bond, we do not have the money to spend on any of those things you just showed us.
Yeah, there's public-private ventures or co-projects, and there's also public-public co-ventures. So as Brad mentioned earlier before, at the junior high school for a gym. So we own the gym. Maybe don't listen, City of Brea folks, if you're online, but they maybe rent out the facility and collect the rental fees, but yet have some kind of a shared financial interest in the construction. So, but renewable energy is an idea. Solar panels is an idea, Gail, that you just brought up, where it's an option where without a lot of district funds, except for time of us manning the project, and this is board presented back in the day, but I kind of had them refresh it back in June during COVID. And I don't recommend this. I'm just showing you what this is. This is not who we like or want to go with, but kind of just looking at if we did something with little or no out of pocket and did what they called a power purchase arrangement, which basically we know costs are increasing, whether it be water, electrical, fuel, or you name it, everything's going to increase. How can we hedge those bets in the future that creates for a future board and a future district and administration when they look back 10 years or 15 years from now and go, wow, that was a great decision because you did X. And that freed up general fund dollars for the classroom or for some of the projects that we need so desperately now to fix. But so yes, Gail, to answer your question, this is an example of one private-public co-venture, and many. But I just want to let you know, this is something that all sites that need, again, there's going to be mandates. I came from the Bay Area where they had a zero emission or carbonless footprint 2025. And I think that's just going to be the wave of the future. So anyways, we can just kind of show you the demands on the dollars that we'd have to look at as we go forward.
And Gail, to your point, when we can continue to march through this tonight, one of the things is putting a facilities committee together. And as we prioritize these things and we start to take a look at what some of these costs might be, absolutely looking for partners and reaching out. But we've got some of our own homework to do before we're at a place where we could approach the city or really any other particular venture.
Yeah. No one will talk to you unless you have a plan.
Rick, next
Right.
slide.
Yep.
School capacity. This is, again, really kind of the lion's share of the time we're going to take tonight. We're interested in looking at where we're at currently because, Gail, to your point that we don't have limitless funds and where we really need to invest dollars that we do have is building out the capacity for our schools, for the students that we have and those that we're expecting on coming to join us. And so we're going to take a look at the next slide. And we're going to look at our current classroom facility. And then we're going to look at a next slide, not yet, Rick, where we're looking at, next slide. So just for instance, Aero Vista has 30 total classrooms. And when we say teacher FTE, full-time equivalent, which means how many adults do we have on campus that are occupying those 30 classrooms? And we have 28. So just simple math problem. We have 2 available classrooms at Aero Vista. And what we don't have currently we don't have lots of shared spaces. In my first year or two of teaching, I was a roving teacher. I had a carpet bag and a shopping cart, and I'd go from place to place to place. That was not ideal for me back in early 90s, and it's not ideal today. And we benefit from not having to do that. So as we share these numbers, we do realize there's still, a little more we can kind of squeeze the orange and get a few more efficiencies, but it's going to be insufficient to address our needs. And I had spoken of in the TK Kinder on the far right side where you showed that there are 0 bathroom facilities if we needed a new Kinder class or a TK class. And if you're a parent of a child that age or you're a teacher of a child that age, you know how important it is to have those facilities readily available for the little loves that you're teaching. So let me give you a for instance though. Olinda, if we did this slide a year ago pre-pandemic, they have 29 classrooms and they would have had 29 teacher FTE. The only reason they have 2 available classrooms is 74 students from Olinda are currently in the online academy. It is my belief, it's our belief that as we kind of transition out of the pandemic and back to kind of regular school in the future, that many of those 74 students will transition back. And so it's really, the available classrooms is really a false sense of security right now. We really don't have 7 classrooms. We have less than that. And that's just with our current population. So that's what we look like at the elementary school. Rick, next slide. Brea Junior High School, 42 for 42. Again, I was a middle school, junior high teacher my first couple of years. So when I roved, I was on a junior high campus and probably taught out of 2 or 3 different classrooms throughout the course of the day. If we did that, we could shoehorn in maybe a little bit more staff, but that cuts into people's ability to really spread out during their prep period and really make the most of their planning time and so forth. You end up having a vagabond staff, and it eats at morale, and it's not ideal. So we are built out at the junior high school. So again, if we were to move to that middle school, it is not because we currently have space at Brea Junior High School. It would be because we increase our capacity by 16 rooms or some number that would be necessary to transition our 6th graders to Brea Junior High, Brea Middle School at some year designated in the future. Brea Canyon, we have a half-time arts teacher, but we basically have 7 teachers teaching in 7 classrooms. And at Brea Olinda High School, we have 84 classrooms and 81 occupied. So we have 3 available classrooms at Brea Olinda High School. Again, could be a little more efficient by people sharing spaces, but that's less than ideal, and it's not really going to be satisfactory to address our needs moving forward. Rick, next slide, please. Do you want to talk a little bit about the police report that we got for the planned growth in the city?
Yeah, so as you know, we've been messaging out our relationship with the new city staff, city planning department is it's flourishing, I guess, for lack of a better word, where we're having more continued dialogue, planned dialogue. And one of the things that I always like to circle back, like our master facility plan, is something that validates what we believe. So we see it, Carrie and Brenda, Brad, we see the principals see the impact. But so when we make assumptions or projections, it's nice always to have it grounded and based in something. So I was able to obtain, which they're updating now this month, a Brea Police Department review of staff and servicing. And their projections, yes, this was pre-COVID and all the financial impacts, but it could be 4 to 5 years out. It could be 6 to 8 years out, but it is years out, probably somewhere in the middle. But I just want to say and let you know that we're using data from other sources. This is our city partners that basically, because our district sits on the city. So yes, let's go through and use the data that they've already reported out and they're using for their as they go forward. And you're welcome to see that as we go forward. So, and they're updating it as we go forward. What I'm doing now is right now, until I show you a little trick later, but we are now going through and having our own forecast. So I am taking information and from what I call a short-term list, I'm going to scroll back up here in a sec, a midterm list and a long-term look of new residential projects that will impact our district, whether it be at the west side of the city, the east side, whatever the impact is in either sector, it's going to impact the district as a whole. And really just trying to keep our own working document. So, for example, the Brea Plaza mixed use here, project it in the comments is 190 single family attached units. And Brad, you can talk about this, but don't worry about this estimated population here. That's the residents they predict. But what we did is we take student generation rates, as you recall, in our developer fee studies, and our Brea generation rates are much, much lower than what the state uses. But we have what we call an age in place community. But we've now broken those out into the elementary schools that get impacted. And of course, the middle school and the high school get impacted. But we're creating a list with really, again, Rick, where did you get that data from? And I'll be building this as we go forward. But really, just to show you, I am getting it from the experts, the people that are sitting in the planning commission meetings, the people that are sitting upstairs above us. For those that don't know, that we sit on the second floor and they're up on the third floor, but really just kind of showing the impacts and really keeping the dialogue back and forth to not just, oh, I think, and maybe they might do this, but really kind of having an idea. The big impact, obviously, as you see on the side, is what elementary school that they would attest to, where they're planning to go. But Olinda is unfortunately the big winner of a lot of these projects. And this one side, Arrow 265, with 604 single family detached and 496 planned single family attached. It's a lot of units over a 10-year period or whatever period, but we know where they're at, what stage they're at, and really on to the right of this, where my thing is, what's the impact of our schools and how are they going to be going through? So Brad, you want to?
Can I ask one more question?
Yeah.
About that? Sorry, Rick.
That's okay.
So I'm just wondering, is there any conversation or, is there any prediction about what's going on right now and the impact going forward on those developments? I mean, we obviously are all waiting, to see how the economy recovers and how we come out of this. And I'm just wondering, is that a conversation at all? I mean, I know we waited for Olinda for like 15 years before it finally was built out. And so I'm just curious to know if that's even a conversation that they're having right now.
Well, in this comment section or notes or however, this is my first pass at it. As an ex-general contractor, still licensed, I'm continuing my project regardless of the economy, because the economy will dictate my sell-through. So in other words, who will buy my product? But the process, the regulatory process, it continues to keep going forward. Obviously, there might be slower periods and quicker periods, and there might be delays, but the march still moves forward. So I hope, my goal is that we continue to have dialogue with the city planning department, which, as you know, is getting better, and just keep that eye on the ball down the road, because for us to react is a much longer road for a public facility to make adjustment it is on the private sector.
Well, in 5 years, prediction is a lot different than, or showing up 5 years from now is way different than showing up 20 years from now. So, in terms of the limited funds we have, I mean, we have to be looking and wondering those things. Yeah.
And what you're looking at right now on the right side of your screen, I think, where it shows the effect of student generation rates and the number of students, that's only based on the short-term section. I'm not even have yet looked at the midterm or even the long-term aspect. It's really the short term, which in the police report staffing says 4 to 6 years. So I have to assume that that data is what they're moving forward upstairs, so, and that might, Gail, we might have a couple of years from now for this pandemic, might take 2 or 3 years of recessionary, which you'll hear later in my budget presentation, might not be so, but that might delay it a little bit, but we still have to plan for it because we have so much work before we can start turning dirt.
Yeah, these are only on this list because these companies, these organizations have approached the cities with a plan. The mere fact that they can assign 312 single family units or 85, detached or whatever, that's because they've submitted plans to move forward. They may stall, they may not build out ERA at the scope or at the speed that they may have predicted, but as Rick talks about, getting through the process to get ready to build doesn't necessarily get slowed down even in a potential down economy. It's how fast will they build out. Yeah. And so we're, much as they're in their planning phase, we're in our planning phase, and the scale on the right that you see those metrics, because Brea is an age and place, how they arrive at the generation rates is they take the total number of students that are in our schools and they divide that by the number of homes and types of homes in Brea. And because we've aged in place, our factors are reduced. As people sell their homes or flip their homes and younger families move in, those metrics are going to graduate up, not astronomically, but incrementally, which will generate even more estimated students than what's on our graph or in our tables right now. So that's based on Brea's current housing to student ratio, which will change over time.
Yeah, one of the projects, Gail, which caught us off guard was this Pacific Highlands. We're like, what the heck is that? That was something that I saw. It's planned for, expected for, I don't know what that means. It means delivery of the first unit or start turning dirt for 2024. And I had to find this information out today. But just to show you, it's an Olinda impact project off of Sand Canyon. So Carbon Canyon, sorry, not Sand Canyon, Carbon Canyon as you go out towards the canyon. So 24 new homes that were planned. And I talked to Jason Killebrew, the city planner, and he said, nothing's been submitted yet, but this is just obviously a concept drawing of something for some land that people have been looking at. So I just don't want us to lose sight of the 5 and 10 year plan. And we can't, because it's going to affect our facilities as we go forward. And as you know by this map here, and we'll get a little bit more into it later, but this is our current district boundaries right now and in our schools. So, a lot of land is over in this sector, and that's going to really put a lot of pressure on right there. I think that's it right there, Olinda.
Olinda.
So, yeah.
So
Right.
Can you explain on that graph the impact of I see Mercury Lane residents are going to be moving in 22. What the impact to our schools is?
Yeah,
Is that the 134?
No, Mercury.
Right here. You're talking this one right here, Nicole?
Right.
Yeah. So obviously that is a single family attached, and you can argue if it really means that there's going to be a one person there or 3 people there or no people there. I came from the Bay Area, and there was always sometimes 2-3 generations in a 2-bedroom apartment, family. Right. So this is in the Arrow Vista boundary, right?
Oh, so it is. Yeah. I thought it was Laurel.
For our purpose right now.
Today we can double check, but I think it's Arrow Vista.
So if we call it Arrow Vista, it's 114 homes. If I go over here, they're not detached homes, right? They're attached homes, as you see there. So really, that calculation is let's just call it 16 students based upon a student generation of 0.2351 times 114. So that's kind of how we get to the impact of that. And that's the only project in Era Vista, so I kind of just picked that one. Thank you for picking that one too, by the way. That just shows you this, that would be 16 expected elementary kids.
Yep.
And then you can do the math too, 0.04 for junior high. And in the high school would have a, 0.07, which would be part of those 73 and 127. So, it's not just elementary, but it's all the middle and the high school. So
Rick, let's go to the next slides.
Yep.
So we can see what it looks like per enrollment. So,
Okay.
So again, talking about, let's talk about the digital platform, Rick, a little bit, and then we're going to get into what the impacts look like to our schools.
right. So enrollment is is probably the most important thing in our district. Not only does it help us project revenues, not only in the current year and the out year, because we are an LCFF funded district, so we get paid on enrollment. In other words, the amount of kids that are signed up, but we also get discounted a little bit due to ADA with average daily attendance. But we would, project enrollment based upon a number of spreadsheets with inputs, and we had a lot of data, but it wasn't organized. But I don't want to say that in a negative way. It was just the way that the information came in from our site. So, obviously, and Carrie could probably, the Torres could probably explain a little bit better. But principals gathering data years out, and who's going to return, and who's coming in new. And we had a lot of data points, and we would massage it. And then we would sometimes have enrollment studies by outside companies and tell us how many live births are going to happen and the change of the real estate market and stuff. But we have the greatest source of information here. It's our student information system, our ARIES system, right? It's live. People log into that now. It is real data every day. And why are we not tapping into that? So good question, right? Here's the answer. So I was doing some research, and we're going to probably move forward with this, but we'll show you. We use this product called Decision Insight right now at 10% of its capacity. We use it, as you recall, it's our district locator. So if you want to know what school boundary you're on, you go to the website and put your address in, and it would say you go to this school. And I'm going to show a little bit more later down the slide, but I want to use one source of data, which is our student information system, because it drives our revenue projections, which is everything to us. It drives staffing, which is 85 cents on the dollar, which is our biggest expenditure. It drives our capacity and our enrollment and our projections and everything that we're setting you up here for developer fees and enrollment projections. It is all fed into it and produces stuff. And I'm going to show you that in a little bit later here. Of course, that's the grand finale, among other things. And just really what's the anticipated changes as we move forward, and this year was an anomaly for not only Brea, because we've been increasing over the years and had a nice, steady enrollment gain. In other words, it was easy to take your sixth graders and assume they're going to become seventh graders and so on, so on. So we saw a natural progression there. And then our TK and K enrollment, which has been expanding, minus this year. Again, this is not a Brea issue. This is across the county, across the state had issues. So, we know that the kinders, that's a bad slide. Sorry about that, but I just wanted to show you.
That was really small, Rick. I tried to print it out and I got lost.
I'll give you bigger ones, but I just see all the reds. Those are kids that didn't show up across the county. It was a trend that I just want you to see. If you go all the way to the right, everything's red. We had a 15% decrease in enrollment of our kinders on the 6th day. But you can see districts had 25%, 23%, 25%. The kinders just didn't show up. But what I wanted to say is the enrollment projections is almost a science. But now with digital platforms and data and software, we can actually get a little bit more accurate and have better projections, and I'll show you here a little bit.
But does
And then,
that concern us? Because we're talking about TK and kinder.
Yeah.
And we're talking about the cohorts moving up through the system. And if you have low numbers at that level, that is kind of your future too, isn't it? I mean, even when you're talking about facilities for those youngs,
Yeah.
you know,
I think to your point, Gail, that one year's data point does not a trend make. We're going to
but
have,
wasn't there 2 years? I can't see that whole slide, but I think we looked at 2 years, didn't we?
no, this year was a fall off for TK kinders, not the previous year.
But we
So-
were in the negative last year too. Can you pull that back up, Rick?
well, let me show, I was going to show our seabeds too. Oh, that's
Yeah,
just
that
1 year.
number, we've
Okay.
talked about that number already. We're down from that 606.
Carrie, go ahead. You had your hand up.
No, I was just going to clarify that, we, in Brea, we have not been trending on the downward trend until this year. We had actually been trending up. And so we know as a county, we're seeing this trend because we are relating it to COVID. But we feel like those kids are going to bounce back in. And currently we do have kinder and TK registration happening, and kids are re-arriving, I guess you can say. And so it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. But I just wanted to clarify that in the last few years, we have been growing in those grade levels until this year.
Well, and excuse me, but isn't it Tustin, the other one that has not been declining in enrollment?
Irvine,
Irvine.
yeah.
And Irvine is in a declining growth is how they like to characterize what they're in. So they were growing at a pretty good pace. And now when you speak to the assistant superintendent of HR, he'll say we're declining in growth. So
Okay.
it slowed down. Mhm.
Okay.
And
And I know this is a unique year. I mean, I get that part, but it does concern me.
Sure. And we absolutely are going to be tracking that. We will be reporting that, but I want us to press on because there are a couple
we're running
other
out of time. Okay.
key impacts that,
Yeah.
that I want to make sure we get to.
And just, and Carrie, correct me if I'm wrong, our new kinders, new TK, they are enrolling online through Aries, the parent portal, right? So
Yes,
it is,
right
it is
now.
live data. So we have able to watch live data. So
Yes.
remember that as we talk a little bit later. Okay, go ahead, Brian.
So, taking those numbers that you saw a couple slides ago that were, Nicole, to your point, what's the impact from Mercury and what's that look like at Aero Vista and a variety of things. So that's where you see those 16 students show up. And if you do the math, somewhere between 20 and 25 students generates a new classroom because it's not just the teacher, there are special education supports and other things. And so there's that average. So we would anticipate based on the new development, we would need one new classroom at Aero Vista when that development comes on. Country Hills, the developments would generate another. Laurel, because of the Heinz project, what's going on at the mall, we would envision 6 new classrooms needed when those get built out and occupied. Olinda or Mariposa 1 and 9 at Olinda, and the lion's share of that is the ERA 265 project. And so again, the approach is do you have declining enrollment and can you absorb that because numbers go down when these new children arrive? Maybe, but when you get to the 6 and the 9, it really takes an approach. Do we want to look at building wings on schools, or do we want to look at potentially a junior high transition into a middle school, inviting the 6th grade, giving 2 or 3 classrooms back to the elementaries for a K through 5th grade program? And those are just discussions for another time. So that's what it looks like at the elementary school. Next.
And I just wanted to say, anticipated new students due to new development, it hasn't been factored in the existing inventory that Brea has in housing, and that turned naturally from an age-in-place society as new families now move into our district too.
It's just new build.
Yep, new build. Yep.
So I just wanted to mention on the last slide that, we're looking at Laurel, 6 new classrooms that we're going to need there. So has there been any thought given to, before these developments come online, are the boundaries appropriate? Do we need to look at changing boundaries before new developments get built. And my other question is moving programs. I mean, you know, Laurel has a big special ed program there. Their daycare or child development program at Laurel. We have a campus like Era Vista that has room to grow. Have we given any thought to moving programs around? I have big concerns with everybody around us in declining enrollment and building new buildings on campuses that are already impacted, especially by traffic, you know, that we're going to be talking about later on tonight. Is that something we're going to be talking about moving forward?
Certainly that can be an approach, and we've done some of that. There are programs that used to be on Laurel that have been moved in recent years, and that's something that we would continue to evaluate. But with the anticipated development, there's no campus. If we went back to, and I'm not asking you to go back at this point to previous slides, we don't have enough inventory at any one of our schools to address all of the anticipated growth. And so there will be a need to build capacity at some of our schools.
But I guess my question is we have Laurel that's on a busy street,
Sure.
and we have Era Vista that has a lot more space and a drop off that's back from a bit is not on a busy street. Have we considered, you know, moving like state preschool? For me, it'd be makes sense to move it to Era Vista where the office is for child development.
Yeah, and
Do those portables belong to them, or are they considered part of the total district?
I think we would have to look into the individual portables. I don't know as I sit here.
And I don't want to get lost in the conversation that we're proposing to say that we need 6 at Laurel and these hypotheticals. It's just to say the current configuration and planning that's going into it, this is a impact, but obviously this would not work, for example, because of some of the things you just brought up, Nicole, about Laurel in particular. So we would have to look at yes, and yes to your questions, but this is just kind of show you if we had a larger facility, which we don't. So we know that's something.
Rick, you guys just recently, one of the reasons we're having this conversation tonight is there was portables suggested to be purchased for Laurel too, correct?
We were looking at that because of, yes, the Laurel and the Laurel and the FAST Academy were planned right now last year, January at this time, to be out of space, and we were contemplating moving programs just to accommodate it, but it did not plan for anything past the 2021 year, not knowing that COVID was going to be such a vicious outcome, but it was something that was still needed to be planned. It didn't mean we were going to move forward, but I wanted to get the blueprint ready to say here to make a great decision. Is this the progress that we wanted to move forward with? You know, so.
I mentioned earlier that this is the first of many conversations, and we don't have the proposal tonight for how we're going to solve every now and future problem for the district, but starting to understand the decisions and the reasons why we need to be engaged in these conversations. Brea Junior High School, this has nothing to do with potentially moving a 6th grade there. The developments would generate 121 anticipated new students, which would be 5 classrooms in Brea Linda High School, 219 new students for 10 new classrooms. So,
and I guess, you know, I'm just going to share I get frustrated because that item came before us pre this discussion. And so now I'm hearing that maybe that's not something that was an immediate need. And so we just need to be front loaded with the information that you guys are thinking about. And this I recognize as long-term planning, long-term thinking, but it also impacts what we do currently. And that item was before us 2 months ago. And so I just want to make sure that we are working a plan. You know, if we need portables at Laurel, it needs to be in the plan. That makes sense and that we've discussed, and that the long reach is also being accomplished. So, you know, I can appreciate all of the things you're saying, and this is all great information. It's a lot of information to absorb tonight. So obviously we are going to have many more conversations. But, you know, we just, to make our decisions in a way that makes sense and holds us accountable, we have to have this information before we, you know, see things as action items.
Well,
Brenda, you have a question?
That action plan still in a next slide. So Rick, let's hit the funding and again, I'm going to wrap up very quickly. Staffing and facility needs as we take a look at the staffing and facility needs. Increased classrooms, our people, and outfitting classrooms and so forth. And so the Decision Insight tool weds all of those data points together and allows you to model and do things. And Rick's point earlier, the data that we were using before, it was many people doing inputs. We were taking data from a variety of places and with lots of people inputting that data. Decision Insight is an exact document that it will be able to generate based on information fed from our ARIES system. So we are very much interested in that to help us bring you better, more accurate and timely information. And we will talk more about what staffing and facility needs will look like as we continue to move forward. Rick, next slide. I want to talk
I know. Gotcha.
about the funding piece.
Yep. So, you know, just a quick, for those that haven't experienced on this road, just, you know, why are schools just so darn expensive, right? Public buildings, you know, just kind of give you the cost components that go into a building. You know, there's cost of land, if that's there, that's an added cost. There's the CEQA process, environmental impact type process, and then the whole approval process. And then once all that done, then you go into your develop and design specs with engineering and approval and state. And then you get your construction process, and a lot of you have been through this, I know, in the past. But this is just some old slides I borrowed from my past life. And construction. What I'd like to highlight is the construction costs back in the Central California range was about $450 per square foot to build. That's not Orange County. I would assume it's in the sixes. But just the whole process that adds cost of regulatory and labor compliance. And then, yes, what always is a question is, why don't you make those darn new developers pay for all your projects? The minimum in the state of California is a process called developer impact fees. You know, every 2 years we get to really relook at those through the state does. And currently we get $4.08 per square foot for every new residential, whether it's single family or a detached or attached, and the commercial projects are 66 cents a square foot. So if it's in this example, if it's $4.50 per square foot to build and we're getting $4 a square foot as revenue, we can see the imbalance. And so that's kind of, a lot of people ask, well, why don't you make that? So there is different avenues how schools in general get funding. There's state matching grants, which we've gone through that in our past year. They say 50-50, but they're usually about 30% of the construction costs always coming in after a project has been going on. Developer fee funding, which we just looked at, we're a level 1. We're not a level 2 or level 3 area, and there's also mitigation fees and agreements you can have with developers, and we've had a CFD, a community facilities district, negotiated too. So knowing those at the beginning of a project, not in the middle of a planned project, is always helpful. And of course, your local lending sources too. So just for those that are watching, don't know how the process goes, that's kind of the 30,000 foot level.
Rick, 20 minutes and we got our two takeaway slides. So yep. Next one.
Yep.
Talk to us through funds available.
Currently, as of the beginning of this fiscal year, we have internal sources of funds, a deferred maintenance fund, which is really a legacy fund of the past. As we whittle down, that's what we call Fund 14, 378,000. Those are to be used for basically maintenance projects inside of a building, HVAC, plumbing, electrical, and those sorts. We'll be using that and eventually phase that fund out. It's, like I said, an old legacy revenue limit fund. Capital Facilities Fund, Fund 25. That's where those developer fees get deposited and from the impacts of new development, and we expend those on expenditures related to impacts of new development. And we've whittled through those and we report out every year. Of course, we also do that in the 5-year report. And then our Fund 40 corporate place, or what we call our capital facilities funds. And there's your balance there for capital facility projects and also technology and stuff that's used in there. So those are type of our internal sources of dollars as of, this is called July. And then our external sources are Hope Legacy funding. As of the beginning of the year, it had about $20 million of cash and cash investments, but they were offset about $10 million in still bonds that need to be service or debt service that's still there until 2026 or 28.
Yep.
Yeah, 26. And so the difference, $8, $9, $10 million. The Board of Hope just elected to move those dollars back in the Fund 40 for facility and for the legacy of the Brea district. So those are kind of our cash, what we have right now. I don't count the general fund.
For facility related projects.
Right.
Yeah. And so the board, as we kind of get into next steps and where do we go from here, those funds are the things that are really in play to try to address a variety of the needs that we've discussed tonight. Anywhere from deferred maintenance, necessary projects to health, safety, welfare, things that need to be addressed all the way through potential expanding of facilities and capacity on campuses. So what do we need to do to dive in further? The second bullet down, the digital platform for planning and growth, that decision insight tool is something that Cabinet is very, very interested in for the purpose of our longitudinal planning, which again, staffing and enrollment, as well as facility capacity needs. That will give us current and kind of rich information as we move forward. And then to really put a kind of action plan down at the bottom, a potential subcommittee that would have board representatives. And again, with a board of 5 people, Gail, to your earlier point, we want to be elbow deep in all of this stuff, and we want to know more. The best way for at least 2 people to become entrenched in this would be for us to put a facilities committee together and have board representation on, and ultimately continue to take deeper dives into our facility needs. Watch this year's enrollment, see if we get that bounce back from the dip that we had this year due to what we believe to be COVID, and then engaging people that can really do some deep analysis of what would some of these costs at different schools. If we did adding portables and wings at elementary schools, what would that cost and where would those go? Or you dive more deeply into moving to a Brea Middle School approach and what would those real dollars? And again, that was addressed in concept in just kind of rough numbers, price per square foot to build out in our facility master plan, but not nearly at the level and depth that it would need to be to bring forward a recommendation to the board moving forward of real better than just general estimated costs. Rick, do you want to speak to anything else on this list?
No, I'm, just realization that we still spend 3% of our budget on routine and restricted maintenance, which we talked about, and just keeping, we don't want to neglect stuff, but, there might be funding and decisions where things might get pushed off a little bit, but we're going to address the health and safety, as you saw, the trip hazards that could create liability issues and claims against the district, minimize those, which we've done a pretty good job and we'll continue to as we move on. I know it's 5:15, but if they want to seize that little digital platform for a little bit or go just a Q&A right now.
Yeah, I would be interested. And again, the next to last bullet point too, is we continue to make progress on this, just regular communication out to our community, let them know steps we're taking, analysis that's going on, costs associated, and as the board contemplates approaches or makes decisions, keep that flow of communication going out to the community so they understand where we're at, what the needs are, and where we're going. Questions by the board? Otherwise, Rick, maybe you jump to that tool and look at a little bit, and then we'll take any questions.
Can I?
Just has a
Oh,
question.
sorry.
Carrie?
Okay, thanks. Okay. I have a million questions, but obviously I get it. This is a soak it in moment. Something that always confuses me and always seems backwards to me, and you touched on it a little bit, is the developer fee piece. So an example would be the ERA project. So the ERA project is going to generate several students in the Olinda area, which is then going to cause us to make a bigger decision on what we do to that site, right? We talked about this. Do we move 6th grade? What do we do is the question. So the thing is, we need to plan for that now, right? Obviously, but the developer fee money that comes to help us mitigate those issues that will have impact on us doesn't come until after. Am I right? We don't get front loaded with developer fee money before the developer develops. So in other words, how do we spend money we don't have to help us when the money doesn't come till after? And if you do that, does the developer fee money get to reimburse us? Or does it sit there and wait to be used on other things? Does that make sense, my question?
It does. I'll take a crack at it first, and Rick, you can jump in. But part of that, ultimately, what will they ultimately be building? What gets approved by the city, and it's driven by square footage. So let's just say they generate $10 million worth of developer fees. Those dollars aren't associated on the dollars that Rick shared with you. He showed you dollars that are in hand. And so those are additional dollars that get layered on that. If you want to look at it, pays back $10 million worth of cost associated with getting ready to build. But what it really does is it infuses $10 million more in a facility fund to continue to move forward as a district addressing your facility needs.
So I get that, but the dilemma we're in is that's a giant impact alone. And if we don't have the money to prepare ourselves for such an impact, we're using some kind of funds to build out the junior high, whatever it is, but those developer fees don't come until after those students come and after those developments are done. So I wonder, is there a borrowing situation? And then when those fees come, we can pay our general fund back. That money we had to somehow use.
That happened at Olinda.
Right. So
is that how that happened? Okay.
Yeah.
I just hate to get in a position where we use money we don't have to mitigate this issue and to prepare ourselves, and then we get developer fee money and it's like raining money. Yay, look at this great pot of money we have. What do we do with it next? Which I know there's always something to do, but we've actually gotten in the hole at that point. That's right. Guess what?
And Carrie, you just hit the crux of funding facility buildings in California, right? We don't get funded for new facilities currently. We don't get funded for deferred maintenance currently. It's left up to your general fund and your local resource. And that's the whole crux of funding for state school buildings, right? In the old days, maybe a different story, matching dollars, but yes, we are on our own. So yes, we do have, in this example here, and I think I still have a sum of money in our developer fee account, which needs to be spent, has to be spent on growth and impact, whether that be a study or beginning the architect study process or doing Title V searches and all the stuff that's required before you can even go to blueprint, right, for construction set. So yes, that is the issue. Now, the funding comes from us when they pull their construction permit. And when I was a builder, I would never pay up front because I didn't have the funding to pay up front. So I pay as I go and as I match my revenue and my expenditures, just like any other private entity. And that's what's happening here. And yes, that is the crux. And we get $4 versus $400 to build. We will never, ever catch up to facility projects as we go forward. But this is why we have such a longer, the dominoes are so high and stacked against us, but we have to keep moving forward because we know that project's coming forward. And so, yes, it does take resources.
And we, again, we've been preaching this message for a really long time. That's why the bond was so crucial to help us, kind of navigate and really effectively plan so that we could do things in the right order, so to speak. But when I look at this, when I look through the plan again, and I just know that, we were planning on the 40 million or whatever's here, almost 40 million plus 123 million. That was our hope coming out of the bond if we had been successful, right? So with what we have and what we said we had needs for, we have less than 25% of that money. So we need to take 75% of our facility master plan and wean it down. And as and I don't even know how we start to do that, but it's almost like we do need to do backwards mapping because that's our reality. This is the amount of money we have until the next time we get an opportunity to ask the community for help. So,
and that's what I think Brad was referring to is maybe we focus in on, I don't want to use this word, but narrow our focus down. We were looking at a district-wide process, and maybe our focus now just needs to be impact. What's our biggest, excuse this word, bang for the buck, but maybe we focus in on the junior high and we put our resources there and we think smaller in terms of $1 or an ask or some type of financing vehicle, whether that be a private placement where we have to go out and use Carrie's word, borrow the money, or a combination of everything. And maybe we focus there, get that done. Okay, now we have to go out and modernize all the 6 elementary schools because now they got 2 or 3 classrooms. And that's a thing there. Yeah, Brenda?
I just wanted to, I know we're running really short on time, so thank you for letting me step in. But, when we look short term and long term, I think, Gail, that's also to your point with what our district needs are. So when we look at student enrollment and where do we house our students when they come, because we are confident that we'll retain our students and continue growing. It's a minimum of 6 months with DSA to change the footprint on our campuses, which is why you saw the Laurel Portable. Because staffing is very fluid, and I won't get into that tonight, Brad and board. We can talk about that later on how that works, because that's our season, and it's hours and hours of work out of my office and Carrie's office, and we all work together with that. But we need a place for our teachers and we need a place for our students, and it's very challenging to find adequate classroom space that meets the needs and expectations of our community. So we can save that conversation for another day, but I agree that, Gail, we need to meet short-term and long-term goals and needs for our district, and it doesn't happen overnight, and that's why you were presented with a request for portables. We did run out of space at Laurel, and we walked that campus. Same thing at FAST. So I really do think it's something we should talk about in the future. It's not only repairing and improving our facilities, but it's making sure that we have the number of classrooms we need to hire new staff and accept new students.
And time is going to catch us here in just a minute, and I just want to kind of reiterate that it would be important because we do need to do a deep dive into just our plan, what are our immediate things, and building the capacity to accommodate the students that we have and those that will be coming is absolutely a priority that rivals the health, safety, and welfare of our students. And staff members. So those are those 2 big elephants in the room, and wanting to canvass the board about, are there people, and again, we don't need to make the decision right now, but arriving at a board member or 2 that might be interested in joining us in a facility committee for the district would be next steps. And then we would bring back regular reports on the work the committee's finding and help kind of honing that focus on where do we need to go next. Any last questions or comments in the 2 minutes that we have before we
Can
jump?
we have this slide? I like this slide. I like
Well,
this.
Yeah, what I'm kind of showing you is the technology that we want to employ, and we're using this now anyways, as you recall, in our site, our school site locator, but this is just a software that we want to expand with. It does everything. And you know what it is? It takes data from Aries automatically every day as students enroll, disenroll. So we can not only plan certain things, but we can actually plot and say, what if this happens? And I'm not going to show a lot of it because of time, and I'm a rookie at it. I'm getting better at it. But, you know, if we just wanted to look at where our K through 5th graders, you know, live, and it kind of will show that here in a sec. If you, hopefully you can see that on the thing, but it really helps us tune in to where our students are. It's a great little program. It talks about enrollment. It'll also do countless demographic studies for us at a touch of a button because it's live data, right? This helps us for not only a revenue planning, but it's got a million calculators like, oh, Brenda, let's do our staffing model. You know, this is where, watch her get so excited. This is 2017 data, this, because they helped us, they were looking at this when we started the thing, but Brenda would spend hours, days, her staff, countless arguments with Carrie and principals, and at a touch, so now, yeah, go ahead. What?
No, I said, this is, if I could jump in, we have 2 minutes. This is really key. When Rick brought this to us in cabinet, I was very excited because.
So now I have a staffing model for her.
Yes, this is phenomenal. So the other Excel spreadsheets that he showed you is out of my office, and I literally manually work on those spreadsheets and update our projections, working with Rick's office. It's something I've done for years in Brea and other districts. And this just helps us arrive at our staffing needs in a more efficient manner. Yeah. And we're also able to run different combo scenarios. So a lot of work that Carrie and I do with Brad and Rick are looking at where do we need combos. When we tell the association, we literally analyze each teacher's classroom and enrollment. That is a very true story. So this software here gives us the opportunity to run different modeling.
Combo
scenarios.
classes.
Yes.
So there's a calculator for that.
Yes.
So and then really the nice part, because we were talking about what's the impact of our future residential development. Oh, guess what I can do now? I can see what specific products now, and this is old data, so don't worry, they made this up using our data, but you know, Country Hills, it's going to produce these kids based upon certain data endpoints as we go forward. So it allows us to plan by using real, live, updated information. Please don't look at the numbers. This is not accurate. This is just for show and tell.
Hey, Rick,
Yes.
I'd like to keep going, but we're kind of out of time.
I
So
hear you.
we're going to go ahead and close this study meeting and I'll give everyone 3 minutes to get a drink and come back to our open session in just a minute. Okay.
Oh, I forgot. Oh, it's 5:30. Jeez.
Thank you, everybody.
All righty.
So we're closing.